our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Who watched the Penguins game last night? By show of hands, who watched the Penguins lose? Did anyone watch the post-game show? It was a great game last night, an historic game last night. They played the Rangers, for those of you who weren't able to tune in. The Penguins scored first in the game, but the Rangers answered right back within 15 or 16 seconds, I think. Then the Rangers scored a second goal in that first period. It was 2-1. I think it was 2-1 through the whole second period. Then finally the Penguins evened it up in the third period with a great goal on Lundqvist. And they went the whole way down to regulation, not being able to score a goal, but some heavy hits. Malkin just plastered a guy, and some great shots on goal. Well-played hockey. And then they went into overtime, obviously. And the overtime began with a breakaway for Crosby. And all of us Penguin fans were like, the game's over, Crosby's going to score. But Lundqvist blocked that, and they went further into the overtime period. And there was penalties, a 3-on-3 for a little bit, and then a 4-on-3. Just amazing hockey to watch. And the overtime finished with another breakaway for the Penguins. This time, Letang, who also couldn't score. And we're like, we can't score in 2 breakaways in overtime. How are we going to win? So then it went on to the shootout. And the shootout in the NHL works by, if no one scores, there's 3 guys chosen for each team that just get a breakaway on the goaltender, alternating back and forth. So first for the Penguins was Malkin, and he goes down and he couldn't score. And then the Rangers come back, and I don't think they scored in that. They did score in that one. So 1 up for the Rangers. Then Crosby, he goes down, and he does score to tie it back up. And then the Rangers, they didn't score. They did not score. And the final was Letang, who didn't score. So it's 1-1. And if the Rangers score this goal, they win the game. And so Dan Boyle, one of their defensemen, goes down and shoots, and the puck just trickles in off the left side of Fleury. Rangers win the game. And so that's how the game finished last night. The Rangers celebrating on the ice. The Penguins all file off and they go into the locker room. And the fans are leaving. The Rangers, after their celebration, they go into the locker room. And we're sitting there in our house at least, and we're too lazy to change the channel because the remote was over there. And so we're just watching the game. And probably like the fans at the arena, most of you turned off your TVs or went on to something else because the Penguins, they just lost. Then Bob Airy noticed something, one of the commentators for the Penguins. That guy, he hit the puck twice to go into the net. That last shot from the Rangers on the breakaway apparently hit the post. I'll use the light stand for the post, bounced back, and his stick then kicked it in the second time. And for those of you hockey knowledgeable people, a double hit on a breakaway is an illegal shot, no goal. In overtime. In the shootout, yes, or a penalty shot, something of that like. And so the people in Toronto, the officials in Toronto, called into Pittsburgh and said, it was no goal, illegal goal. Get the teams back out, the game still goes on. And so they had to tell the guys, get back out on the ice. Fleury later said that he had his helmet, his jersey, and his top pads all off. And so they had to put all their uniforms back on and get back out on the ice. And predictably, the Penguins were able to pull it out. Sutter's the first guy out. He scores on Lundqvist. And then the Rangers can't score. A shocking turn of events. I mean, the Penguins had lost this game. They were in there breaking sticks and taking their uniforms off for the uniform guy to clean up. The Rangers thought they'd won the game. I mean, these guys had lived this out, probably some of them thousands of times in all the games they'd played in their life, right? They know how this works. They know what it is to lose the game. The Penguins thought they lost. The Rangers knew that they had won the game until everything changed. It was a shocking finish, not what they expected. So I rewrote my sermon this morning after that event. Not what I expected. Kind of shocking. Because expectation is a funny thing. Expectation probably pushed some of you to turn your TV off after that moment, that Dan Boyle goal. I know that's true because some of you have confessed that this morning. Stacy's aunt and uncle who were at the game, I texted him, I said, "Did you see that?" And he's like, "See what? We left." Whoops. The Easter morning story that we heard just a few minutes ago is unexpected and shocking. It's hard, though, for us, 2,000 years later, to think of it that way. All of us here this morning have probably heard that story so many times that it has lost its shock value, its wow factor. Like, wow, he was dead and he's alive. I mean, us Christians, many of us have formed our lives around those two moments, death and resurrection for Jesus, that it just isn't quite as shocking anymore for us. Jesus died and resurrected. Yep, that's what we're all about. That's our faith. But let me point out how shocking it really is. How shocking it was for Matthew and the points that he's trying to make telling this story now that we've gotten to this point in the gospel. First of all, these women, they're kind of the centerpiece for this story. They show up, and what are they there to do? They're not there to find risen Jesus, are they? They're there to find dead Jesus. Because with them, they have oil and spices. They have linens, because they're there to treat Jesus' dead body and preserve it until they take care of it next year. They do not expect to find Jesus alive. They are there to find him dead. Last week in the gospel, you heard the Jewish religious authorities and their concerns. They knew Jesus was dead. They did not think Jesus was coming back and being alive, yet they were concerned about Jesus' story of resurrection. So what was their question to Pilate? Put guards there so those evil disciples can't steal his body and make it seem like he was resurrected, because we all know resurrection's ridiculous. It says in this Easter story for this morning that when the women saw the resurrected Jesus, they got down on their knees and they worshiped him. And then Jesus says to them, "Don't be afraid." Have you ever thought about that phrase? Don't be afraid? When we hear this story, do we think, oh my goodness, it's terrifying? No, because we've heard it all of our lives. But if you were these women in the first century, and a guy you thought was dead just showed up on the road, it would be terrifying. Judas. Remember the Judas story? Obviously we do. He betrays Jesus. And then when he finds out in Matthew's gospel that he can't undo the betrayal, he gets so distraught, so upset, that he goes out and kills himself. He kills himself because he's guilty, because his conscience is clouded. But do you think that Judas would have gone out and killed himself if he knew Jesus was going to be resurrected? No. Judas knows that Jesus will be dead. And Judas thinks that dead is dead, and people don't get resurrected. All of the main players in this story are shocked when Jesus is resurrected. Earlier in Matthew's gospel, Jesus tells about, there's like 3 stories in a matter of a couple chapters of Jesus predicting his death and resurrection. And they will take the Son of Man and they will kill him, and on the 3rd day he will rise again. And in all of these stories, they kind of finish by saying something like this: and the disciples did not understand what he was talking about. I mean, Matthew again and again tries to remind us that this is a shocking, mind-blowing sort of thing that's about to happen. In the one story, it says Peter stands up and says, "No, Lord, it'll never happen like that," because he can't even conceive of death and resurrection. And of course, Jesus in that story calls him Satan and tells him to get behind him. You see, it is hard to articulate how shocking the resurrection really is in 2014. In one way, it is beautiful that this is just sort of part of our story and we've just embraced it so much. When we talk about Jesus' death and resurrection, it just comes so easily. But then, as beautiful as that is, maybe we need to understand the shocking nature of what God does in the resurrection. Because the reality is, God is shocking. What God did in the resurrection is shocking. What God continues to do in our world now, in our lives right now, is also shocking when we see it. Too often we walk through the world around us and our expectations are low and our fears and our anxieties are high. In that gospel today, it used the word fear 4 times. Fear, afraid, 4 times, just in those few verses. Like the guards, they're the first ones. They're so afraid that they just pass out and faint on the ground. And then the women, when they encounter God, the angel, and then Jesus, it says they're afraid, or they're referred to in a fearful way 3 more times. When you encounter God's shocking working in the world, sometimes it will be terrifying. And so this morning, I want you to finish this sermon. I'm not going to finish it. I'm taking the easy way out. Because this is Easter, and we know Easter really well. I want you to turn to a few people nearby you, preferably not just your spouse or family members, maybe somebody different. Yes. You're like, I know there's people that didn't verbalize what Joe just said, but you're like, I don't want to talk with them. I invite you to talk with them. Share a story about something that God has done in your life that is shocking. This week in Bible study, we used the word miracle. That's not a very Lutheran word. I mean, it is, but we don't go around saying, there's a miracle! But it happens. We talked about such things in Bible study this week. Right now, take a couple minutes and finish this sermon. Share with your brothers and sisters around you a shocking way God has revealed God's self to you. Go ahead. What has God done shocking in your life? More talking.